Well, hey there. You've stumbled upon the intersection of internet quandaries and psychological insight. Welcome to Veritas Views on AITA, where the quirks of the internet meet the expertise of Veritas psychology partners.
Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Michael McBride. I'm joined by our dynamic duo of psychologists.
Hi, I'm Dr. Gayle MacBride, and with me, in addition to our lovely host, Dr. Michael McBride, is Dr. Daniel Kessler, psychologist, friend, business partner,
Coffee
and
drinker.
today, my co-partner in untangling these internet quandaries.
And I'm just enjoying a really good, dark, thick as mud cup of coffee and reminiscing about our recently recorded podcast about coffee and the way one might like or not like their coffee. That I'm particularly fond of that episode, especially the ending and the bonus conversation. I think was really valuable. So go back to that one. That one was particularly fun. But I'm enjoying this cup of coffee and looking forward to sipping on it while Michael tells us about a brand new issue we've never heard about before.
And Dan, I will just lovingly tell you, I'm not going to make your coffee. You have really high standards that I probably can't meet.
You're probably right. You're probably right.
Michael, what do you have?
Sure. Well, welcome both of you again. For any of the newbies out there, if you don't know what Am I the Asshole is, in short, someone's posted a scenario out there and asked readers, who's the asshole here? And that's what we're going to talk about today. If there's any identifiable information, I've tried to make it a little more discreet. And if you're new, stick around through the credits. We're going to be talking about something that Gayle and Dan are working on, and just kind of a relatively new, I don't know, concept to me anyway. So I look forward to hearing more about that. But for now, neither Dan nor Gayle have seen or read this post before. I don't share any of the stuff that I'm going to throw at them. So let's see what they do with this. The subject is, am I the asshole for pranking my struggling friend with a fake lottery ticket?
Yeah, probably.
Oh,
Yeah, I think so.
yes.
Yeah. It's gonna be hard to get out of this one. We always want to hear the fact pattern, but I have a hard time seeing how OP is gonna get out of this one. This seems
I
like
fear this might be a really short conversation.
this could be a total dick move on this guy's part. But let's hear more, because there may be good reasons behind this particular dickish sounding move.
Okay, so this is the post. So the OP is 27 male, and he has a friend who's 28, also male. He's been having a rough time lately. He lost his job a few months ago and has been pretty stressed about money, so things have been tough for him. A few days ago, a group of us got together and thought it would be funny to prank him with a fake scratch-off lottery ticket. It's one of those gag gifts that looks real at first, but it's really just a joke. I figured it would lighten the mood and give us all a laugh, including our friend. When he scratched the ticket and saw he had won $50,000, he was ecstatic. He kept saying how this was life-changing, how he could finally catch up on rent, and how things were turning around for him. At that point, I started feeling really guilty, but I still thought it was a harmless joke. When I finally told him it was fake, his whole expression changed. He just went completely silent, got up and left. He hasn't been responding to my messages or calls since, and now some of our other friends are saying that we went way out of line. I didn't mean to be cruel. I genuinely thought it would be funny once he got over the shock. We're all struggling with money, so it's not just him. But now I realize maybe I misread the situation. I feel awful, but I also don't know that I'm really that terrible for playing a joke. Am I the asshole?
Wow. Talk about a tone deaf
Yeah.
interaction. I mean, I
Yeah.
get you're all struggling and that is unfortunate, but it doesn't excuse a poorly timed joke at someone's
Yeah.
expense.
This is awful. And I remember when one of my children, and I feel comfortable sharing this, that when my children was very young and learned about the concept of a prank, just started doing things that were kind of destructive, not hugely destructive, but things that, and we kind of sat down and like, if it's a prank, everyone will laugh at the end. Like that's a good prank. When you've been pranked properly, you think it's when you find out you've been pranked, you just are like, man, that was good, and you laugh
Kind
and
of
they
like when your
laugh.
colleague doesn't tell you that her light switch controls your light switch.
Exactly. No, I was thinking about that. Like that's the kind of harmless, funny
Uh-huh.
prank that everyone, and that's what makes a really good prank a good prank, is when everyone thinks it's funny at the end. Here is someone, like I heard this and I had a hard time even hearing it. It felt so awful. When you're under the when you're in a situation when you're deeply in debt, it feels crushing. And here's this guy who's feeling crushed by his financial situation and deeply pained, and he saw he was going to have this opportunity to find a way out. I just,
Mm-mm.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. This is, and while, yeah, go on, Gail.
No,
I've talked
I love a
fine.
good prank, as my family knows. I embrace the April 1st tradition,
Mm,
but I do think carefully about how I think it's going to play and whether or not anyone's going to think it's funny. Now, that's not to say that I've always played pranks that people think are funny, and I get that there are times where you can play a prank and it doesn't go the way you expected. So I do feel for this guy. However, in this situation, I would have hoped that he would have been able to kind of see it far enough down at the road and come to the sort of what I call the what if conversation, right? What if I do this, and what if he really believes it? And, and what if, and come to that logical conclusion of that outcome. There are some conclusions that you don't see coming and couldn't have
right,
predicted, but this
right.
one feels predictable.
Yeah.
And I think he really did his friend wrong. And now
This
he's
this one
doubling
is,
down and sort of like defending against it. He needs to lean
yeah,
in and fall on his sword and say, man, I am really,
yeah.
really sorry. I done fucked up.
Right. And this does really call for one of those, like, I can't believe I was so tone deaf and so hurtful to you. What
Yeah.
I did was truly awful. I mean, this is an absolute fall on your sword moment where you can't apologize profusely enough and have to accept that you may have harmed the relationship to the point that it's irreparable. This one's awful. This one
It,
really is
it,
awful.
it is really, really
Yeah.
painful. And I think as often in the cases when we get these questions, the person is asking the wrong question. Am I an asshole for playing this prank? Maybe, mildly dickish, perhaps. Where it's turning toward asshole for me is you're defending it.
Yeah.
You're not falling on your sword.
No.
You asked the wrong question, which is,
Yeah.
am I an asshole for not really apologizing
Mhm.
deeply? Am I the asshole for standing even a little bit of my ground here? I needed to have walked this way, way backward and
Right.
focused on relationship repair and not my own sense of ego and self-preservation in a poor mistake I made. We all make mistakes. We
Right.
misjudge things. That happens. We're going to disappoint our relationship partners. You
Hmm.
have to be willing to make the relationship repair,
Right.
especially when they so clearly show you that you have harmed that
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah. And we often talk about this idea of needing to have some intent to be a true asshole
Hmm.
to men's, right? The
Hmm.
guilty mind of, like, I did this thing knowing it would harm the person. And while he's making the argument that he didn't know it'd be that bad, this is one of those moments where if you stop and think for even a moment or two about the situation, you're going to realize that this is really going to be awful for this person.
Hmm.
And he tries to, like, minimize it. Well, we all have money problems. No,
Then
no.
you don't joke about the most painful thing. Maybe it's fine to bring a little levity, but you don't play on the most vulnerable, painful thing going on in
Right.
someone's life. That's not where you place that joke or that prank.
No, no. And that's just, it just doesn't have a place in that moment. And his
Mhm.
defense of it doesn't have a place in the moment. But it kind of, we've talked about I think we've talked about this concept before, and I could see what part of what happened. He talked about this being a group of friends doing
Mhm.
it. And, when you get a group of people together, the group of the people tend to often make poorer decisions because they go to more extremes. And this
Mhm.
is an opportunity where if it had been one guy thinking about it, he might go, two guys like, oh yeah, oh, and one of them might. But once you get like four or five, six friends together, they might just be playing off of each other, and no one is speaking up the reservations, and they're
Mhm.
taking that more extreme shift that we see that happens when you aggregate people together
Mhm.
and they start moving to the extremes. And this is one of those times where we've aggregated people together and they've moved to a more extreme. Now, I know, I understand in saying this, I'm making the OP less of an asshole potentially because it's a groupthink thing. But part
Mhm.
of what we have to do in groupthink situations is be the one who speaks out and be the one who like goes, wait a second, is this really a good idea?
Right. And that comes back to surrounding yourself with people who have different opinions and are willing to push against you. Michael raised his hand. He's so cute.
Yeah,
He's like,
Michael,
oh,
please, you have
what's up,
something to
Michael?
say.
I did. Part of why I chose this one is when I was a kid, I was privy to this experience. I knew that somebody was going to get a fake lottery ticket. I wasn't doing it. An adult was doing it to some other people, and so I literally witnessed this. And what was
Hmm.
really interesting from even a child's perspective was watching the person who scratched the lottery ticket off realize that they, according to it, had won, and then how they like tucked the ticket away and did not want to disclose that they had won I think it was $10,000 in this case. And everybody
Probably in
around,
1980 money, though.
Yeah.
knew this was a joke. And so they kept kind of going like, oh, what happened? Did, show us your ticket and blah, blah, blah. And he very embarrassedly showed the ticket and revealed like he had won all this money, and he was feeling kind of guilt that this person had probably spent $1 on this lottery ticket, and then they had given him $10,000. And so there was like this weird dynamic there. And then the punchline was, oh, and how do you cash that in? And you flip it over and it was like 1-800 fuck you or something. And then there
Oh,
was like that shame that fell, and
Oh,
everybody, like, I
yeah.
just remember feeling, kids would call it cringe or whatever, but like just feeling
right.
like, oh my God, like I want to take that back. If there was some way we could
I
undo that.
Oh, what an
Um,
awful situation! Because even the guy who scratched the ticket off in that situation had to have felt shame
Yeah.
over like tucking the ticket in his pocket and trying to keep it from his friends and not wanting to admit this.
Oh.
Like who makes those fucking tickets?
Apparently,
I
there is
mean,
no
if we're
good
talking
scenario
about
where you can give
we
this.
often discuss the minor third parties, but let's go ahead and talk about the minor third party here of the guy who made those tickets and the fact that there's a market for them. Like like there's a whole lot of assholes here because if you make fake lottery tickets, you're doing something is going to cause problems in relationships and with people's lives and with arguments and hurt feelings, and you're doing it anyway for a couple of bucks. And if you're buying that ticket, you're probably an asshole. I'm sorry if you bought if any of the listeners bought that ticket and you've got one that turned out well, I want to know about it because I don't see a situation
Say,
where
drop
one
us
of
a
these
line in the
turns out well.
mailbag. I want to
I
know a story where this went well.
I
Tell us.
can't imagine a situation with this. Even if you're talking about someone like, I mean, I been working for 30 years as a psychologist. We're okay. Like I've got two jobs. I did two half-time jobs. I'm not crossing a boundary there. But you know, if I got a lot, I'd be kind of excited about it. Like if I got a lottery ticket around $50,000, I'd be excited about it. If I found out it was a joke, a gag, I would like it wouldn't be devastating to me, but I would be angry. I would be hurt. I'd be like, this isn't funny. Like
Yeah.
I wouldn't be like furious and storming off, but I'd be like, you know what? That wasn't really funny. Like that
Yeah, I
didn't
think it
like
plays on this feeling of being humiliated, which is
yeah.
I've been put on public display.
Thank you. That's
And
exactly
now I
it.
am being ridiculed for my reaction. Whatever that reaction is, I am now the butt of the joke, and I did nothing to deserve it. That's the key in humiliation, is
Yeah.
I didn't deserve what's happening to me. So it's like shame plus like this extra ickiness. And I
Yeah.
think
If I got
that's
the fifty
that's
thousand
the
dollars, my
right.
the, hey, cool, a new car.
Right?
My car's like it's fine. It's 7 years old, but I wouldn't mind a new car. I wouldn't mind picking up a, and I might hurt by this. Like, oh, you made me think I was gonna buy my. I probably wouldn't buy myself a car because
But it would
I'm
be the
frugal.
humiliation of
I'm too
whatever you
frugal.
reacted and you
It
tucked the
would be the
ticket or you
humiliation.
celebrated, you would feel that
I
emotion.
would be.
That's a
I would.
really, really tough one.
This is one that I would just like.
Yeah.
I just can't think of a situation where again, getting back to my first comment, I don't see a situation where everyone at the end of this is laughing and everyone thinks it's funny, even for someone for whom they're not financially desperate. Um, I can't think of a situation where we're going to say like, I'm okay with this. This was hilarious. That you pranked me in this way that I found to be funny.
But call us assholes, tell us we're wrong. right?
Right.
Respond
Right.
to the mailbox. Tell us the scenario
No,
where this played, and it was hilarious for everyone involved. And that's the key. We want to hear that everyone laughed.
everyone, yes, a good prank, everyone is laughing at the table afterwards when you tell the story. This is not that situation at
Sorry,
all.
I'm now laughing about a prank I pulled on your kids. I hope they still laugh about it.
Oh, putting like broccoli inside of the chocolate or something. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean but and
they're
that's the kind of
funny.
thing that's the kind of thing that's funny. I mean, you do something like that, everyone kind of has a laugh about it. Isn't this
Yeah,
funny? And like, but this is just
this
hurtful.
is not
And
funny.
I what the other thing that we see sometimes that people do,
Hmm.
and I want to call this out, I was only joking.
Yeah,
And someone says something hurtful and like, oh, I was just kidding. I was just joking. No.
doesn't make it better.
It doesn't make it any better. It's that it was at the very least that makes it a thoughtless act. At the very most, you're doubling down and trying to blame the other person, whether intentionally or unintentionally. This is a kind of a gaslighty moment. If you're
Yeah.
mad, and I say gaslighty because I'm not going to call it gaslighting, but
Hmm.
if I said something that was hurtful to you and you're angry and I go, oh, I was just kidding, you're telling the other person it's your fault that you're
Right.
upset,
You
not
shouldn't
my
have these
fault,
emotions
not my
because this
fault.
wasn't right. Your emotions should be in line with whatever I'm saying my intentions were.
Right. So if you find yourself saying, "I was just joking, I was just kidding," you probably that should be one of those. I think, and Gail, tell me if I'm wrong, but I
No,
would say
I
that
think you're
anytime
fine.
you say to someone else, "Oh, I was just kidding, I was just kidding," you've done something wrong.
You
In
have,
almost
and
every case, you've done
you
something
should
wrong.
change this and say, I'm really sorry. That went over poorly.
Yeah.
Right. And I've hurt you.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Right.
And this
That
is one of
response
those
needs to be
times where,
changed.
gosh, OP was I'm actually willing to call him an asshole, even though he didn't mean it to be hurtful. With his first act, you looked at him as being dickish. I like that first act, he
Hmm.
should have thought better. But the second act, as you pointed out, of doubling down and saying it wasn't that big a deal, he shouldn't have
Hmm.
taken it that big a deal. Like no, no, you're being an asshole.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think about, and we've talked about this in forensic terms, right? If someone is doing something that harms another in an egregious enough way that we press charges and you go to court, right? We have levels of what I don't want to say criminal descriptions. I don't know, criminal
Mhm.
charges, right? If in the most extreme, we can talk about manslaughter versus second degree murder versus first degree murder, right? And in
Right,
each of those, the
right.
outcome is the same. Someone is now deceased at the hand of someone else.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
there's the level of intent here. And in no case should you get off of not having punishment just because I didn't mean to. Right.
Right,
And in some cases, the I didn't mean to, and you just simply didn't think through what your actions were going to mean in this scenario, right? And we
right.
can go to some extremes, like, well, I didn't mean to hit someone with my car. I was driving drunk and I just didn't, I didn't think about it. It's like, well, it's not okay that you didn't think it through. It still resulted in a really terrible outcome here.
Yeah.
And this person needs to be more planful and look at what the potential outcomes were. And again, I know I'm taking this way to an extreme, but sometimes
No,
it's the
no,
only way
I
to
want to jump
highlight the
off on this.
process in place.
I remember learning this when I was doing my forensic training,
Hmm.
this idea that voluntary intoxication is not an acceptable criminal
Defense.
defense. If you do
Right.
something, if you intentionally got drunk, if you drank by choice to excess and in your drinking commit a crime, that voluntary intoxication is neither an excuse nor a mitigating factor. It doesn't reduce the severity of the crime or the severity of the punishment because it's voluntary intoxication.
Hmm.
And just to point out, like if you've ever given the excuse, oh, I was drinking, voluntary intoxication is not considered to be, at least in the criminal
Even
world.
even if you do something dickish like
If you
pull a prank while drunk or spill
right,
the beans. I mean, that's the thing, right? When you're intoxicated, you sometimes say things that you shouldn't and disclose someone else's information. Oh, well, I was drinking. It shouldn't
right.
be an excuse for that, right? Well, then don't drink and hold secrets, man.
Exactly. So voluntary and I'm interested to hear if anyone disagrees with me on that. Like if you disagree, give us a shout out and say no, no,
Right.
no. If someone's drinking, I cut them a little slack.
Can I give you what the internet said?
Yes,
Yes,
please. We'd
please.
love
Okay,
to hear what the internet
excellent.
said.
So you'll be delighted to know that the internet, you pretty much unanimously called him the asshole, and really gave it to him. I don't think anybody said you're not the asshole. The only dissenting comments were that a light everybody sucks here because you tried to apologize and your friend is ignoring you. And while he's hurt, he should have that conversation.
No, don't force the conversation.
No.
The guy's not ready to have the conversation. He has the right not to have it. You hurt him.
And a good apology doesn't come like we talked about this before. A good apology doesn't come with a request for anything. When you apologize to someone, you don't ever say, okay, and will you forgive me?
Yeah.
Because that's not a real a full apology is just I screwed up. I hurt you in my what I did. And I was wrong, and this is what I'm going to do differently. And it's never like will you forgive me is not part of an apology. It negates some of the power of the apology. And if he's expecting the guy to respond to him after he apologized, that's asking for something in return. And apologies never have a quid pro quo. Apologies just, yeah, I screwed up. I made a mistake. So
one of the comments about you're the asshole here left another great phrase. Like, I love these little phrases that people come up with. So this one says, imagine how excited he must have been only to have it snatched away as a quote unquote joke. That's not a prank. That's emotional whiplash. You're the asshole 100%.
yeah.
And
Totally
the
agree.
description of the outcome really was emotional whiplash. That was kind of the visual I had when you were reading it.
Yeah, that's awful. It's awful. And this is the one I have had more trouble hearing than probably all the ones we've talked about before. Like I had to look away. It was painful to hear this one. I just could not help but like intensely feel for this guy who got the prank played on him. How old were these folks? Did they say?
They were mid-20s. Like, I think the oldest in the group is 28, 25 to 28 in that range. So
yeah, that's old enough because like, you know, the
Old enough to know
brain,
better.
yeah, the brain doesn't fully develop in the early 20s to really project oneself into the future. And if they were like 21, I could almost like, I still can't forgive it, but I could almost like, it's a different, but once you're past 24, 25, your brain is developed enough to understand the consequences of your actions in a much more bold way. So no.
I'm glad you reminded me of that, because one of the pranks that went wrong early on for me was a very good friend of mine lived down we were like 10 or 12. He lived down the block, and we would always, we just did stuff at each other's homes all the time. And, for one April Fool's Day, we were sleeping over at his house, and we thought a hilarious prank would be if in the morning everybody woke up and they tried to move around the kitchen, but they couldn't open any of the cabinets. So we got super glue and we super glued all the cabinets and drawers shut in his parents' kitchen. And they did not enjoy that at all. But my brain wasn't fully formed, so I'm excused from that. But I did learn an important lesson. Like you said, pranks everybody has to enjoy. They did not enjoy that at all.
I remember a sleepover, and I don't think that any of the kids would object to me talking about this. Like our oldest kids had when they were young, and they decided to all sleep in the hallway right outside our bedroom. And my wife and I got up in the morning, opened the door, and there was just like half a dozen 13, 14-year-olds just lined up on the floor sleeping. And it was hilarious. Like, how did they even get there that quietly? And they were like, and what do you do at that point? Do you wake them up? Do you step over them to go get your morning coffee? Like,
that's really funny.
That was funny. And it was kind of a funny prank played by, I just imagine them all like sneaking up there and like they have got to be really quiet because they can't hear us here in the hallway. And then they went to sleep and they couldn't, they probably went to sleep earlier than they usually would at that kind of a sleepover because they were trying to be quiet in the hallway.
Right. I'm sitting here and I'm going, okay, guys, I'm going to ask you, am I the asshole? So one of my probably most memorable pranks was when I was a mother to much younger children. They were preschool age. And so I just took I did a couple things that morning, but I took one of their socks and I just sewed a line so that your foot couldn't go all the way in the sock. And the child went to put on their socks and shoes and couldn't get their foot in the sock. It was just a running stitch. It was really easy to pull out, but they were so upset that they couldn't put their foot in the sock. He did not find it funny. Am I the asshole? Because I did not see that outcome coming.
There was no malicious intent,
But
but in the
yeah, right?
spirit of the caring rebuke,
Right. Yes. Right.
I,
I feel
at
really
least
bad about that one because they were
I'm
so
gonna,
upset.
yeah, I hate to,
It's okay, Dan, say it.
yeah, you're kind of the asshole
I
there.
was kind of the asshole, wasn't
Yeah,
I?
you're kind of the asshole there. You know what, Michael, if we're done, lead us out because the bonus conversation actually applies to this topic.
Okay, perfect. Well, please follow and share Veritas Views, any of the podcast platforms with your neighbors and friends. And as always, stick around through the credits. Dan has something to say. I can't wait to hear what it is.
You can follow Dr. Dan Kessler at Dr. Dan Kessler and Dr. Gayle MacBride at Dr. G. MacBride. Oh, and you can find them both at veritaspp.com. Credits. Tickling the Ivories, Matthew Reddington. Art, production, and design, bringing this show together with flair and finesse, Michelle Love. Recording and editing, turning chaos into something worth sharing, Michael MacBride. Intro, outro, I'm Kelly Buttrick, a VO talent who just happens to be Dr. MacBride's cousin. Cats, CJ, Linus, Sadie, and Griffin. Hosting by whomever lost the coin flip. Interruptions by all their children. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Listening to this podcast does not constitute a therapist-client relationship. If you believe you may be experiencing a mental health issue, please seek the assistance of a qualified mental health professional. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, you can call or text 988 from anywhere in the U.S. to be connected to Crisis Mental Health Services.
Thanks for listening. As promised, here's that bonus conversation.
So I believe based on when this is going to air, just recently, my business partner, Dr. MacBride, and I gave a talk about a concept that we've touched on before called moral injury. And the idea behind moral injury is when I have done something that is outside of my moral ethical belief system and harmed someone else by my actions, and I feel terrible about it. And we talk about this idea of the moral injury. I did this thing that is wrong, and I hurt someone. I feel, and that intense feeling. This comes out of some of the literature on PTSD and combat and actions taken, but also it applies to the work I end up doing with it a lot, and I know Gail, you do this too. Is with people who've been had infidelities in their relationships, or have done other things in their relationships or in their parenting that they themselves feel awful about. And here in this previous story, like OP had an opportunity to experience moral injury. And one of the things we sometimes do when faced with the actions we do ourselves, instead of experiencing as a moral injury, I did this thing that was harmful to someone else, and I feel bad about it. OP doubled down on I wasn't all that bad a person. And it's unfortunate because if he'd given himself the chance to experience moral injury, he may have had a greater opportunity for healing and may have had a greater opportunity to connect with a friend who he harmed in this situation. Gail, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, my thoughts are, as we close the podcast, and I was telling you a bit about the sock prank that didn't go well. As a mom, I want to make sure that my children's happiness is important, their health is important, and that they're safe. And I think, this is an example of a time when I made a child really unhappy, and it wasn't funny, right? Because they didn't laugh. Now, I think where I went wrong, it was the audience, right? This small child really couldn't comprehend this kind of joke that I had played. And so yeah, there's a bit of moral injury. And I say this and I disclose it in part because I think we all find ourselves in this territory from time to time doing something that we wish we hadn't, or doesn't exactly align with our moral and ethical beliefs. And we need to lean into that and understand it so that we can grow and change and not make those mistakes again.
Right. Like we're going to, and you said this earlier, we're going to sometimes disappoint our partner. We're going to sometimes not be present for our children the way we wish to, or someone we care about. And we can choose to double down on that and blame them and make excuses, or we can choose to say, yeah, I screwed up, and experience that discomfort. And moral injury comes with a lot of pain. Experience that discomfort and then act on that through an attempt to repair or heal the relationship.
And it was just, oh, sorry.
No, good.
I was just listening to a story on the radio, and maybe we'll be able to find it and link it in the show notes about how talking about these kinds of traumatic events, because moral injury often comes with a kind of trauma, is healing and is part of, narrative is often a part of human healing and being able to process and that kind of thing. And there's quite a bit of power in being able to talk to somebody very openly about those
Mm.
mistakes that you don't know. And us as therapists get to be that neutral third party
Mhm.
because we don't hold those other judgments or expectations. And often that's the power of that kind of therapeutic relationship, as opposed to engaging in kind of this confessionary sort of
Right.
interaction between someone that you know and is invested in your life. And so sometimes people say, well, why therapy? And therapy's stupid or whatever. And they're really dismissive, but there's a powerful role. And I'm not just saying this because I'm a psychologist and a therapist.
Sure.
But, there's a really powerful role for that neutral person who doesn't have an investment. And often that is one of the first things that my clients will say to me is, I'm here because I really need someone to listen
Mhm.
who doesn't have a stake in any of this. And
Right.
so being able to have those conversations about those moral injuries with someone neutral and unjudging is often the way that we navigate and get through these really difficult scenarios and situations.
Well stated.
Thanks for tuning in. Tune in again next week for a whole nother Am I the Asshole debate.
We love hearing from you, so please review us on Apple, Spotify, or, well, wherever you're listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please review, like, and follow. Also, give it a share. This helps us reach more listeners.